Kia ora te whānau, I'm just open us with karakia now. Whakataki te hau ki te uru, whakataki te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi aki ana te atākura, he tio, he huka, he hauhunga, haumie, huie, tai kie. Tēnā koutou, kua huihu mai nei, ngā mihi ki ngā mana whenua, e te rangatira o te wā, Diane Matthews, tēnā koe, i ngā manuhiri, no mai haere mai, ko aio, ko ingarangi, ko kōtirana te whakapaparanga mai, engari ko tamaki makaurau, te whenua tupu, kei o tautahi ahau, i noho ana he pauhiwa ahau i PGF Services, ko Abby Popham tōko ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. E hoi anō, kia ora koutou. Thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. We feel very privileged to have Di with us today to share her expertise on older people and gambling. It'll cover kind of a range of things, hey, around older people and abuse and addiction and that. Di is a registered nurse with Age Concern and has many years experience in the sector of older people as well as addiction. And spent 12 years working with PGF Services as a counsellor and public health worker. So we'll learn a little bit about Age Concern and what they offer, as well as what makes older people more vulnerable to gambling harm, and some stories from your experience as well, hey? Yeah. And I think this is something that is a real gap in the sector. Because a lot of people aren't yet asking about gambling, it is still really hidden in the shadows. So to be able to hear these stories from someone who knew how to ask the questions and what a difference that could make, I think will be really powerful. So thank you, Di. Okay. We've talked a little bit already and introduced ourselves, but if we could just type our names, our service that we're from, and what region we're in into the chat, that would just be really great for us to know who's here. And as that comes in, we'll see those popping up, and I will hand over to Di to get started.
Well, thank you, Abby. That was beautiful opening, and I'd like to say hi to everybody and introduce myself. So I'm Diane Matthews, and I work for the Age Concern office here in Christchurch. I work for the Elder Abuse Response Service, which shortens to AIRS. Don't ask the most awful shortening, but so Age Concern have the contract for the AIRS service in Christchurch. There's a lot of different services around New Zealand that have it, but in Christchurch we have it, and we cover from Dunedin up really. So we have a lady who does Oamaru and a lady in the West Coast. So I've worked there for 2.5 years, and when I went there, I have a long history working in addiction. And when I worked there, I said, oh, you guys could do with having a bit of knowledge about addiction, because, you know, if you got us baby boomers coming through, and you're going to get inundated. And they said, the senior nurse at the time said to me, oh, we don't have any referrals for gamblers. He said, no one has gambling problems, and we don't get any referrals for drinkers either. And I said, oh, well, I'm a bit surprised. But of course, as the story goes, that's all I've done from day one is work with people with alcohol, drug and gambling problems. So it just shows you the level of, what's the word, not people in the sector don't ask the questions and they don't get the answers. Yeah. So the AIRS service is a contract with the Ministry of Social Development to provide elder abuse response.
Shall I go on to this?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Go on. Yeah.
Back. Have I missed it?
Yes, stay there. Okay. So we provide information, advice, that sort of stuff, families and carers, and raise public awareness. We don't have a public health worker though. Develop and maintain mutually beneficial working relationships with agency and people in the community, which is why it's really good to be here today. So what is elder abuse and neglect? Elder abuse and neglect is a single or repeated act or lack of appropriate action occurring within any relationship where there's an expectation of trust, which causes harm or distress to the older person. So there's all sorts of types of elder abuse, as you can imagine. There's physical abuse, the psychological, emotional, financial, material abuse, sexual abuse, and institutional abuse. Facts and figures. Next one over. Oh, it's a default thing. Facts and figures in New Zealand, we've had a excess of 2,000 referrals were received last year by Age Concern where abuse was suspected. About 75% of these cases, abuse was confirmed. 75% of alleged abusers are family members. 45% of alleged abusers are children of the victim. 45% of clients are over 80 years of age. 36 are socially isolated. 46 of older people who are abused live alone. So those are great facts and figures, but the reality is how many of these referrals were directly related to gambling or alcohol drug addiction. So was it a family member who's affected? Was the abuse caused by somebody suffering from addiction? But yeah, so we don't know because we don't ask the questions and we don't have the stats for that one. So neglect is about active neglect, is about when occurs as a result of another person failing to meet the physical and emotional needs of an older person. Passive neglect is a result of inadequate knowledge or lack of trust in prescribed services, and we get a lot of passive neglect where people just don't do anything. And self-neglect, of course, we would call hoarders and people who won't take care of themselves. It occurs when older adults, by choice or lack of awareness, live in ways that disregard their health and safety needs, sometimes to the extent that this disregard becomes hazardous to others. Hoarding seems to be a major problem around New Zealand. Psychological abuse, and that's our main one. Behaviour that results in mental anguish or despair. So we've got intimidation, harassment or humiliation, threats of harm, their family, their pets, which is really unusual. I have a lady whose husband threatens her dog when she goes out and leaves him. Withholding affection, verbal abuse, ignoring, treating the older person like a child, and saying hurtful things. We get a lot now with the housing crisis of family moving in with the older person, and just yesterday we had a call about a 50-year-old son that has moved in with his 80-year-old mother. He's brought his girlfriend with him, and they pay $120 a week for the both of them for board and lodging and everything, power. And when we asked a few questions, we found that he was a gambler, and he spent all his money on gambling and was putting pressure on his mother to, reduce his board. So, there's no matter what you abuse, if you dig a bit deeper, you can find that there's gambling or something involved. There's sexual abuse, of course, and unfortunately, I haven't had any cases, very many cases involving sexual abuse. Institutional abuse, we can relate that to gambling if someone's in a rest home or in a hospital where there's theft from the room of possessions, material things, or money, and again, relationships will be formed with staff and the older person, and they may end up abusing them, taking the money, or the older person's quite happily gives their card. They all, because we're all a bit technically challenged at our age. It's very easy for the older person to trust people with their cards, and this leads to all sorts of trouble, as you can imagine. Physical abuse very rare. Oh, not very rare, but rarer than psychological abuse. Financial and material abuse, and this is the one where gambling comes up obviously a lot more. And Abby was telling me about Zach Guilford taking 75,000 from his grandfather to gamble. Yeah. So that's a clear example of exactly what sorts of things happen. And over the years, of course, I've had older people who, I remember one guy in particular, he was a fireman, and he was lopsided because he carried the fire hose on his shoulder, and he'd become quite disabled because of that. And he'd lent his son, who was having trouble with his business, he'd lent him all of his money, all of his savings. So this couple had nothing, going into their old age with nothing, and lived on the super because their son was a compulsive gambler, and he had told his parents that his business was failing and needed propping up. So they had invested all this money into his business and lost it all. So parents will believe their children and try and help their children. And no matter how you get them to try and stop giving them money, they will do anything to make sure the children are comfortable. And we work with this all the time. No matter if the child is 60 or 64, they will still try and protect them and look after them and worry where they're going to go if they get booted out of their home. So financial or material abuse, illegal or improper use of funds or other resources, withdrawing money from bank accounts. Had, since I've been there, had a lady, her husband died, her son-in-law embezzled $2 million out of the man's account. The man that had died went into the bank and misrepresented himself, got $2 million to gamble, and it just broke the whole family apart, of course, as you can imagine. But the woman did get her money back. So banks are a lot better and a lot more protective of the elderly these days. And actually, in some of the banks, they actually had someone who, that's all they do is deal with elder abuse, coming and checking out whether or not it's a genuine withdrawal or a genuine person helping with them with the money. Misuse of power of attorney. Is there any questions around the power of attorney? It's usually people interested in it. Failing to repay loans, withholding money from older people. So if you're a gambler, you're more likely to try and keep your mum on budget. I had a case, a grandma didn't know how to use internet banking, and she wanted to buy her groceries online, so she gave his grandson the passwords. He merely transferred money out of her account into his for years and for huge amounts of money. So yeah, so that's usually how we pick up the gambling, is with these kinds of financial abuse, because as we all know, the money has to go somewhere. If there's a question about where the money is, then you can ask about gambling here. So why does elder abuse occur? The carer stress. So you get people very involved with looking after their elder parents, and there's a lot of stress involved because it's 24/7, and unlike that beautiful baby that we saw before, babies grow up, but older people just get older and more dependent. Once had a guy, the first time I ever worked with Age Concern, I was working for PGF, and this guy, he was looking after his mother-in-law, and the abuse that he would do on his mother-in-law, he would go and play the pokies on his pay night. If he lost, it was okay, he went home and put her to bed and gave her a dinner. But if he won, you might find him in a taxi racing home, giving her spaghetti out of a tin while the taxi waited, and then throwing her into bed with no bath or anything, and then racing back to the pub. And that was probably one of the first things I did with Age Concern. So we worked with this guy, and we worked with this old lady with about the abuse that he was doing. Yeah. So they're so vulnerable. They're, you know, some of them are quite socially isolated. Of course, if you are bored and you go out, even if you're socially isolated, you're sitting next to the person who's gambling and you feel like you belong. Yeah. So the older person's very vulnerable, and that's what makes them so susceptible to gambling and to gamblers. They're dependent on others for all or part of the care, so they have to trust others. They have a dementia or challenging or repetitive behaviours, negative personality traits or personality disorders, sensory deficits, socially isolated. One of the things I found with gambling, I mean, you know, you're in your 60s and you're playing bowls and you're going fishing and you're doing all these sorts of things, playing croquet. And as you get older, you're physically less able to do things. So, but one of the things you can do is sit on a chair in front of a poker machine and play that, or sit on the computer. It's very easy as people lose their prowess, their physical prowess, that they turn more to the entertainment in the form of poker machines. And you know, what do we do with the elderly? Do we, on their birthdays or Christmas, what do? We buy them lotto tickets, we buy them scratchies, you know. Everyone has enough hand cream to last them for the rest of the year. So it's a very easy to introduce somebody to gambling. In the industry, of course, well, you all know their little tricks. I'm not up to date with many things, but I know in Australia that fans from the casino will go to the rest homes and pick up the elderly, take them to the casinos. They'll take them to clubs where they get the free coffees and morning teas. So they really target the older people. And I do know that in Christchurch, if it's your birthday, you can, is that still the case? You can get a free lunch from Sky Skitters from the casino.
I would say it's very likely, but yeah, I'm not sure. I need to look into that.
Yeah, so that's, no, I know a lot of my clients are like, yeah, let's go for lunch. It's my birthday. Let's go to the casino. So they work very hard. The loyalty cards are something, old people love loyalty cards. So they are definitely vulnerable, not just from gamblers, but from the industry as well. So why is it underreported? Because we don't ask. We often pick it up in Age Concern as in the financial abuse. And if we ask the right questions, we find that gambling may be a part of it. But yeah, we don't ask the questions. In Christchurch at the moment, we've got a pilot group and it meets every second week at Age Concern, and it's for a significant other group. So it's for sisters or brothers or partners or husbands and wives of people with an addiction. Gambling is one of them. So they get together and talk about and support each other about how hard it is. It's very hard for the elderly to leave the situation, but to be able to cope with it and get some realistic goals about coping, like not giving the gambler money. So these people get together on a Tuesday. So anyone here in Christchurch, if you want to refer anybody to the group, they just need to be over 65 and have somebody within their vicinity that suffers from a gambling or alcohol problem.
Do you know of any other groups across the country like that?
There's one in Christchurch, but it's for younger people, but no, not specifically for older people. So I've been working, trying to get age concerns around New Zealand too. Because they're not going to change, they're not going to move away, they're not going to kick their husbands out or get rid of their kids. Yeah. But if we can get them together and they can just do simple things like not give them money, and they can support each other. So I've personally been trying to get the age concerns to pick that up, but as with many age concerns around New Zealand, you know, addiction isn't something that they see as big is a big problem.
So you talked about how a lot of the time people aren't asking. How would people ask? Like what works for you?
Oh, I think that when you get a rapport with people, you can ask the questions, So, and because it's so blindingly obvious that something's going on, that they can't deny it, but it's always difficult for them because of the guilt and shame associated, like with many other addictions, to admit that their son is taking money from them to gamble, or their daughter's using drugs. But yeah, it's just a trust thing, and we have a lot of autonomy in Age Concern, so we're able to form relationships with the elderly. So it's not a straight in and out service. It's a beautiful service where we can create a relationship and maintain a relationship with that person. Yeah. So if there's been assault and the police are involved, they'll often involve us, and we'll be there in the home once a week supporting the family through that court system. And usually there's some addiction there. Yeah. So why shame and guilt? They often worry that if they identify the addiction, that they're going to be told to move out, and they worry about their child not having anywhere to live. And that's been problem is escalated since the housing problems. So there's a lot of that where kids are moving in with their parents and taking their problems with them, and trying to get their elderly parents to deal with them. Yeah. And of course the elderly don't know what is going on. They have no idea why this money isn't around, and where do you go and get help? They don't know what's happening. So the other thing about the elderly and gambling is they're physically vulnerable. You guys might remember the case I was working for PGF, where this couple won the jackpot, and they went home and someone broke into the house that night and murdered them and took the jackpot. Well, that's not uncommon for the elderly to be targeted if they have money. And I had a client she was beaten up in the car park and had a jackpot. They followed her after she won the jackpot. So, they open themselves to all sorts of dangerous. Yeah. So I don't know if there's anything new in that, but I just like for people to be aware that even if the elderly aren't gambling, that they are impacted by anyone that they know have any contact with that is, because they are so vulnerable. They're liable to be taken advantage of in some way.
Thank you, Di. That's beautifully timed.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, we've got a couple of minutes. Does anyone have any questions? I'll just stop sharing the screen.
I tried to think of lots of stories, but of course you forget them as you get older. Yes.
All good, Hayley. Thank you. Did anyone have any questions for Di?
Di, how much do you get involved with the perpetrators of the abuse, or is it more around supporting the older person?
We don't work with anyone over 65. It's an excellent, the thing is, we have one client, and that client is the old person. So all we do is focus on that older person.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd certainly refer somebody to your services if they come into contact with them. But we make sure that one person is safe and looked after.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? I've certainly learned a lot.
Really?
Yeah, genuinely. That was really great. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for being here today. As I say, I'll send the recording out once it's available. So if you want to share it with your teams, I know there are a few people that registered that weren't able to make it today. So I'll pass it on.
Can I just ask, if you have a client, can you ask them if they've got an elderly relative or an elderly friend that would like some support from Age Concern? Because inevitably they may need some.
Thank you all, and if you've got any other questions that pop into your mind later, feel free to email me, email the address that's sent to you the link for this hui. This is also a monthly wānanga, so every month we have a different speaker or a different topic, and I send out the details for that. So next month it will be around applying for funding for Gambling Harm Awareness Week. So anyone can apply for that if they want to do an activity in the first week of September around gambling and get money from Te Whatu Ora. So I hope to see some of us there at that hui, and I will just close us with karakia now at 12 o'clock. Nice timing. Ni karakia tātou. Kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia turu ki whakataka ai, kia turu ki whakataka ai. Haumi hui.
Take care.